All right, good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for this important presentation on heat illness prevention. My name is Miriam Owens, and I am the VOSHA Compliance Assistant Specialist. I am pleased to be your main presenter for this session. Joining me today as co-host is Carl Hayden, our VOSHA Compliance Supervisor. Together, we aim to provide you with valuable insights and practical strategies to ensure safety and compliance in the workplace, especially as it pertains to heat-related illness. As we all know, working in high temperatures can pose significant health risks. Our goal today is to equip you with the knowledge and tools necessary to prevent heat illness and protect your workforce. We'll cover key topics such as recognizing the symptoms of heat stress, implementing effective prevention strategies, and understanding your responsibilities under VOSHA regulations. At the end of this presentation, we have dedicated time for questions and discussion. So write down any questions you have so we can address them at the end. Thank you for your attention, and let's dive into today's topic. When we talk about heat illness, it's important to understand that it's not just about being uncomfortable in hot weather. Heat illness happens when the body can no longer keep itself cool enough to maintain a safe internal temperature. That can happen both outdoors and indoors when temperatures and humidity rise. As temperatures rise, the body relies on natural cooling systems to regulate heat. One of the primary ways it does this is by increasing heart rate. The heart pumps more blood to the skin and extremities to help move heat away from vital organs and release it through the skin. Body also produces sweat. As sweat evaporates, it removes heat and cools the body. However, in humid conditions, like we often experience here in Vermont summers, sweat cannot evaporate easily, making it harder for the body to cool itself. Heat illness occurs when these cooling systems become overwhelmed. This can happen quickly when multiple risk factors are present, including high temperatures, direct sunlight, physically demanding work, hot equipment, heavy or non-breathable personal protective equipment, or dehydration, also a lack of acclimatization in new or returning workers. When the body can no longer regulate its temperature, heat-related illness can develop and rapidly increase in severity. Every year, dozens of workers across the United States lose their lives, and thousands more suffer serious illness due to heat exposure in the workplace. While exact numbers vary year to year, federal data continues to show that heat remains a persistent and under-recognized occupational hazard, with many cases likely going underreported. In Vermont, workers in industries such as construction, agriculture, landscaping, manufacturing, utilities, and indoor facilities without adequate climate control may be exposed to hazardous heat conditions while performing their jobs. Although Vermont is known for cooler climate, periods of elevated temperatures and humidity during the summer months can still create dangerous working conditions. It's also important to recognize that heat illness is not limited to outdoor work. Indoor environments such as warehouses, commercial kitchens, production areas, and mechanical spaces can accumulate significant heat. These conditions can place workers at risk even when outdoor temperatures seem moderate. Now let's talk about OSHA's National Emphasis Program, or NEP. It's for heat. This one is specifically for heat. A National Emphasis Program is an initiative that OSHA uses to focus enforcement and outreach on specific hazards that are causing serious injuries, illnesses, or fatalities. And heat is one of those hazards. Due to the increasing number of heat-related incidents across the country, OSHA launched a national emphasis program specifically targeting heat hazards in the workplace. The goal is simple: to reduce worker exposure to heat and prevent serious outcomes like heat exhaustion and heat stroke. Under this program, OSHA is increasing inspections in industries where workers are at higher risk. These are often referred to as high hazard industries, and they typically include like construction, road work, agriculture and landscaping, manufacturing facilities, especially those with heat processes, warehousing and distribution centers, roofing and paving operations, utilities and energy work, commercial kitchens and laundries, foundries, mills, and other high heat indoor environments. These workplaces either involve direct sun exposure, heavy physical labor, or indoor heat sources that can significantly raise temperatures. One important thing to understand is that the inspections can be initiated when the heat index reaches a certain level. OSHA uses heat index data to determine when conditions may pose a higher risk to workers, and that can trigger inspections. During these inspections, compliance officers are looking for key elements of a heat illness prevention program. This includes access to drinking water, rest breaks, shaded or cooled areas, employee training, acclimatization procedures, and emergency response planning. They may also speak directly with employees to assess their understanding of heat risks and what to do if they start experiencing symptoms. Even though there isn't currently a specific federal standard just for heat, OSHA enforces heat safety under the General Duty Clause. That means employers are still required to protect workers from recognized hazards, including excessive heat. Heat safety is a national priority across the whole nation, and employers, especially those in high hazard industries, should be proactive not just to meet OSHA expectations, but to protect their workers and prevent serious incidents. So now that we've talked about the facts and how serious heat illness can be, the next question is, what actually increases the risk? We'll get into that. One of the biggest factors we need to pay attention to is humidity. When humidity levels climb, especially above 60%, it becomes much harder for the body to cool itself down. When conditions are both hot and humid, sweating alone may not be enough to keep our core temperature in a safe range. Here's what's happening inside the body. When we're exposed to heat, the brain, specifically the hypothalamus, signals the body to start cooling itself by producing sweat. This is one of our primary defenses against overheating. Under normal conditions, that sweat evaporates off the skin. As it does, it carries heat away from the body. This process, known as evaporative cooling, is what helps maintain a safe internal temperature. But when the air is already full of moisture, like it is on humid days, sweat doesn't evaporate as easily. Instead of cooling down, it can just sit on the skin. And that means that the body has to work even harder, and it becomes much easier for heat to build up internally. This is why high heat combined with high humidity is especially dangerous. Even if the temperature doesn't seem extreme, the body can still struggle to regulate itself, increasing the risk of heat stress, heat exhaustion, or even heat stroke. It's not just the temperature we need to watch, it's the combination of temperature and humidity. Staying hydrated, taking breaks, and keeping an eye on yourself and your coworkers are critical steps in preventing heat related illness. We've talked about how heat and humidity affect the body, but another major factor that can significantly increase the risk of heat illness is direct sunlight and radiant heat. When workers are exposed to direct sun, the conditions can become much more dangerous than they might initially appear. First, it's important to understand that the temperatures we often hear about, like the heat index, are typically measured in the shade. When you step into direct sunlight, that exposure can increase the effective heat index by as much as 15 degrees Fahrenheit. That means a day that seems moderate on paper can quickly become hazardous when you're working in full sun. In addition to that, there's something called radiant heat, and this heat that the body absorbs directly from the sun's rays, adding to the overall heat load. Radiant heat doesn't just come from the sun. It can also come from hot equipment, machinery, furnaces, or paved surfaces. This is why both outdoor and indoor work environments can present similar risks when heat sources are present. Another factor to consider is sunburn. While it isn't classified as a heat illness, sunburns can still impact the body's ability to cool itself. because it damages the skin and it can make it more difficult for the body to regulate temperature, while also adding discomfort that can make work seem more challenging. When you put it all together, it becomes clear that heat illness isn't caused by temperature alone. It's the result of multiple factors: environmental heat, direct sunlight, radiant heat, and the additional heat your body generates during physical work. That's why tools like the wet bulb globe temperature, or WBGT, are so useful. Unlike a standard thermometer, the WBGT takes into account temperature, humidity, radiant heat, and air movement, giving a much more accurate picture of the actual heat stress workers are experiencing. It's also important to remember that even when temperatures are below public heat advisory levels, physical demanding work can significantly increase the heat load on the body. So far, we focused on a lot of the outdoor conditions, things like direct sunlight, radiant heat, and humidity. But it's just as important to understand that heat illness isn't limited to working outside. Indoor environments can create serious heat risks as well, sometimes without workers even realizing how hot it's getting. In many workplaces, heat is generated from the inside. Equipment and machinery, such as furnaces, ovens, dryers, and other heat producing tools, can raise temperatures quickly and keep them elevated throughout the day. At the same time, crowded workspaces can add to the problem. When multiple people are working in the same area, body heat builds up and airflow becomes less effective, increasing the overall heat load in the space. What's important to remember is that the body responds to indoor heat the same way as it does outdoors. Heart rate increases, sweating begins, and the body works to release that heat. But if the temperature, humidity, or workload becomes too much, those natural cooling mechanisms can be overwhelmed, leading to heat stress or heat illness just as quickly as they would outside. Because of this, prevention indoors is just as critical. Ensuring proper ventilation or using fans to move hot air can make a significant difference. Providing access to cooler areas and allowing time for rest and recovery helps the body regulate itself. Staying hydrated is also essential. Even if it doesn't feel like you're sweating as much, the body is still losing fluids. And just with outdoor work, it's important to monitor every warning sign like dizziness, fatigue, nausea, or excessive sweating. Indoor environments are not automatically safe from heat. Recognizing those heat sources, monitoring conditions, and taking proactive steps are just as important inside as they are outside. Limited air movement can actually make heat illness more likely. If there's poor ventilation, that heat and often humidity gets trapped, making it harder for the body to cool down. Even when the temperatures are not extreme, poor airflow can keep the body from cooling itself the way it normally would. So, why does that matter? Our bodies really rely on sweat evaporation to release that heat. When the air is moving, sweat evaporates more easily and it helps cool the skin. But when the air is still, that process slows down. In hot and humid conditions, the air is already holding a lot of moisture, so sweat does not evaporate as well in hot, dry conditions. Or in hot and dry conditions, the body can only produce so much sweat, so cooling is still limited. This becomes especially important in areas with stagnant air, such as like an enclosed room, warehouses, mechanical spaces, or crowded indoor work areas. When limited airflow is combined with high temperatures, the risk of heat illness increases significantly. Air movement plays a major role in keeping workers safe. When airflow is limited, even moderate heat can become dangerous. Some simple steps like using the fans or improving ventilation, opening doors when safe to do so, or moving work to a breezier location can make a big difference in preventing heat stress. An example of this actually comes from a facility where I previously worked that did not have a robust climate control. In the shipping dock area, employees were responsible for creating large cylinders that were roughly 10 to 12 feet tall. And to complete the task, the workers had to use rolling stair platforms to reach the upper portions of the cylinder. Even when outdoor temperatures and humidity were only moderate, The work area near the top of that staircase became significantly hotter due to the lower ceiling height and limited airflow. As a result, employees had to work harder physically while also dealing with increased heat exposure, which added additional strain and increased the potential for heat stress. And I had many complaints about this. And one of the things that we came up with was removing them from the area and rotating that process so that employees could take time to rest in the break room where it was cooler. Also, getting fans in that area. Another important factor that can increase the risk of heat illness is low fluid consumption. Along with proper airflow and cooling measures, staying hydrated is essential for helping the body manage heat stress. When it's hot and humid, the body has to work harder to stay cool, which means you lose more water and important salts through sweat. If those fluids are not replaced, dehydration can happen pretty quickly, making it harder for the body to regulate temperature. As you sweat, the body loses water along with those electrolytes like sodium and potassium, and those losses can become even worse if someone is also dealing with, diarrhea, vomiting, or fever. Without enough fluids, body temperature can rise, increasing the risk of heat exhaustion or heat stroke, and some people are more vulnerable than others. Children and adults over 60 are particularly at risk. Anyone working, exercising, or spending long periods of time in hot conditions is also more susceptible. The good news is dehydration is preventable. Drink fluids regularly throughout the day, not just when you feel thirsty. When possible, schedule strenuous activity during cooler parts of the day. It is also important to watch yourself and your coworkers from early warning signs such as thirst, dry mouth, dizziness, headache, or fatigue. And if dehydration does occur, mild cases can be treated drinking water or like electrolyte beverages. More severe dehydration may require intravenous fluids, and serious dehydration should also be treated as a medical emergency. Staying hydrated is one of the easiest and most effective ways to protect yourself from heat related illness. Another that could be considered when discussing heat illness prevention is the use of heavy personal protective equipment. While PPE is critical for protecting workers from job hazards, it can also increase the risk of heat related illness by making it harder for the body to stay cool. The one reason is increased heat retention. Items such as waterproof aprons, surgical gowns, respirators, face shields, boots, and gloves, they can trap the heat and moisture close to the body. This reduces the effectiveness of sweating and makes it more difficult for the body to release that excess of heat. PPE can also require extra physical effort. Many types of protective gear add weight, bulk, or restrict movement, which means the body has to work harder during normal tasks. That added effort creates more internal heat and places additional strain on the worker. Because of this, heat management becomes even more important when PPE is required. Workers should take breaks, stay hydrated, monitor themselves and coworkers for signs of heat stress, and use cooling strategies whenever possible. PPE is essential for safety, but it is also can increase the heat risks. When protective gear is necessary, extra precautions should be taken to prevent those heat illnesses. Another major hazard that can contribute to heat related illness is physical exertion. Even when temperatures are manageable, strenuous activity causes the body to generate significant internal heat. And when heavy work is performed in hot environments, that added heat can quickly increase the risk of heat stress. This is known as exertional heat stress, or EHS. It happens when physical activity in hot conditions raises the body's core temperature beyond safe levels, and workers performing demanding tasks such as lifting, digging, carrying materials, pushing equipment, or operating machinery are often at greater risk, especially the harder and longer they work. There are several warning signs to watch for. These include dehydration, a rapid heart rate, muscle cramps, dizziness, nausea, fatigue, and an elevated body temperature. If these symptoms are ignored, the conditions could worsen quickly. Heat strain can also affect mental focus as the body becomes overheated. alertness, coordination, and decision making may decline. That not only increases the risk of heat illness, but also raises the chance of workplace accidents and injuries. Physical activity in the heat is more than just tiring, it places serious strain on the body. Taking regular breaks and staying hydrated, pacing work activities, and recognizing early warning signs are all critical steps in preventing heat related illness. The next important hazard is to discuss is workers' physical condition and overall health. Even when employees are working in the same environment, not everyone responds to heat the same way. Some individuals are more vulnerable to heat related illness because of their fitness level, medical history, or how well their body has adjusted to the heat. One of the biggest factors is a lack of acclimatization. Workers are not acclimated to hot conditions and are much at higher risk. Acclimatization is the process where the body gradually adapts to working in warm or hot environments over a course of time. And without that adjustment period, the body has a harder time regulating the temperature, which increases the likelihood of heat stress. This is especially important for new employees or workers returning from time away or anyone suddenly exposed to hot conditions. Personal health factors also play a major role. Chronic medical conditions such as heart disease, poor circulation, mental health disorders, or obesity can make it more difficult for the body to cope with the heat. I personally have a disease called Raynaud's syndrome, and my body does not regulate heat as well as maybe others may be able to regulate. So I have to be cautious when I am even working outside because of that extra precaution of my chronic health. The next factor to consider, especially with those who do have chronic health issues, is certain medications can actually have increased the likelihood of heat related illnesses. Both prescription and over the counter medications can interfere with the body's natural ability to regulate temperature, which can become especially dangerous during hot, sunny, or humid conditions. Some medications can affect thermoregulation and fluid balance. For example, diuretics, antipsychotics, antidepressants, and certain blood pressure medications may make it harder for the body to stay cool or maintain a certain blood pressure or proper hydration. Sorry. When this happens, the risk of dehydration becomes greater. And the combined impact of several medications can also place an additional strain on the body during heat exposure. There are some practical steps workers should keep in mind. Fluid intake may need to be adjusted if medications affect hydration or electrolyte balance. It is also important to closely monitor for early warning signs of heat stress, such as dizziness, nausea, rapid heart rate, weakness, or confusion. Anyone with concerns about medication and heat exposure should really speak to their healthcare provider, and the provider can help them determine safe precautions, review medication timing if needed, and explain symptoms that require immediate attention. Medications can make even moderate heat more dangerous. Staying hydrated, taking breaks in cooler areas, protecting yourself from the sun, and responding quickly to symptoms can help prevent serious heat related illness. The final risk factor we're going to cover is age. As we get older, the risk of heat related illness naturally increases. Aging affects the body in several ways that make it more difficult to safely manage heat exposure. One of the main changes is reduced heat tolerance. Older adults do not adjust as easily to sudden changes in temperature, and the body becomes less efficient at regulating core temperatures. This makes it harder to stay cool during hot conditions and increases the risk of that heat stress. There are also several psychological changes that contribute to this risk. For example, cognitive awareness can be affected, meaning even healthy older adults may not recognize early signs of overheating or dehydration right away, which can delay a response. The body also retains more heat with age. Sweat glands tend to produce less sweat, and the heart may not circulate blood as efficiently, which reduces the body's ability to release heat through the skin. Chronic health conditions also play a role, as older adults are more likely are taking more medications when it comes to certain diseases like heart disease, high blood pressure, or even diabetes. Older adults should really take extra precautions, including staying well hydrated, limiting exposure during peak heat, and taking frequent breaks in cool or shaded areas, and closely monitoring for early signs of heat related illness. So, now that we've covered the major risk factors of heat related illness, let's move into something just as important. We want to choose simple safety practices that can help prevent those illnesses from happening in the first place. The good news is that many heat related incidents can be prevented with planning, awareness, and a few practical steps. One of the most effective practices in helping workers is acclimating them to the heat. This is where the body gradually adjusts to working in warmer conditions over time. And a common guideline is the 20% rule. On the first day of heat exposures, employees should work no more than 20% of a full shift at full intensity. From there, workload can gradually increase by no more than 20% each day until the worker becomes acclimated. This is especially important for new employees, workers returning from time away, or anyone exposed to sudden temperature changes. Employers can also reduce heat strain by adjusting schedules and workloads that may include shortening shifts, rotating physically demanding tasks, or scheduling heavy work during cooler parts of the morning or even the evening. During peak heat hours, strenuous work should be limited whenever possible, and frequent rest breaks in shaded, cool, or air-conditioned areas are also critical for allowing that body time to recover. Hydration is another key prevention strategy. Employers should provide a cool, accessible drinking water and encourage workers to drink regularly, about 1 cup every 20 minutes, even if they don't feel thirsty. By the time someone feels thirsty, dehydration may already be starting, so proper hydration helps the body regulate temperature and greatly lowers the risk of the heat stress. Providing potable drinking water is not only a best practice, but it also is required under OSHA sanitation standards. Engineering controls can also make a big difference, improving airflow with fans, ventilation, or air conditioning, which helps increase evaporating cooling and lowers heat buildup in the work area. Sometimes small changes in air movement can significantly improve worker comfort and the safety. Clothing also matters. When possible, workers should wear light colored, loose fitting, breathable clothing. That just allows them to the sweat to evaporate. So fabrics like cotton, linen are generally better choices than polyester, nylon, or other materials that trap heat. Loose clothing allows better airflow and helps the body to cool more efficiently. Wide brim hats can help protect the face, neck, and shoulders from direct sun exposure, while sunglasses or tinted safety glasses help protect the eyes. Sun protection is another simple but important step. Workers who spend time outdoors, especially like doing lawn work or anything like that, should apply sunscreen before starting work and reapply throughout the day, especially if sweating heavily. And sunburns, because a sunburn can actually significantly reduce the body's ability to cool because it damages the skin and doesn't allow that perspiration to dissipate off the body. For jobs that require PPE or working near radiant heat sources, specialized cooling equipment may also be helpful. Reflective clothing, cooling vests, circulating air systems, and water cooled garments can all reduce heat exposure when selected appropriately for that task. And these controls can be very effective, but they should be paired with hydration, rest breaks, and close monitoring. The next group of simple safety practices focuses on awareness, teamwork, and being prepared to respond quickly when heat illness occurs. Even with strong preventive efforts, workers and supervisors still need to recognize warning signs early and take immediate action. One of the best tools on any job site is looking out for each other. Workers should be encouraged to monitor themselves and their coworkers for signs of heat stress. Because sometimes a person experiencing heat illness may not actually realize how serious their symptoms are. So having coworkers pay attention can prevent an emergency. Everyone should know the common warning signs of heat-related illness, and which include dizziness, fainting, nausea, headache, confusion, weakness, heavy sweating, muscle cramps, or spasms. If someone begins to showing any of these symptoms, action should be taken right away. Move the worker to a cooler area, provide water if they are alert, begin cooling efforts, and when in doubt, call 911 because quick response can save lives. Training is another important part of prevention. Employees should understand the hazards of heat exposure, how heat illness develops, early symptoms to watch for, and steps to take if someone becomes ill. Supervisors should also know how to respond quickly when an emergency medical help is needed. Employers should also develop an emergency action plan for heat-related incidents. This plan should outline who to contact, where cooling areas are located, who will call emergency services, and how to direct responders to the site, and what first aid steps should be taken while waiting for help. Having a plan in place actually saves valuable time during an emergency because it's important to remember that every work site is different. So each location and each job task may have unique heat hazards that need to be evaluated before work begins and throughout the day. Supervisors and workers should regularly assess changing conditions such as temperature, humidity, workload, PPE use, and worker fatigue, then make adjustments as needed. First aid supplies should also be reviewed for hot weather operations. In addition to standard items that you would have in a first aid kit, consider adding cold packs, disposable thermometers, electrolyte drink mixes or tablets, emergency water pouches, cooling blankets, and waterproof tape. Having the right supplies readily available can improve response time and help stabilize a worker until further care is available. Awareness and preparation are very essential. Watching out for one another, recognizing symptoms early, and having a clear emergency plan and keeping proper supplies on hand can make all the difference in preventing any serious heat related illness. So, we're going to talk about the signs and symptoms of heat illness. Heat related illnesses is an umbrella term used to describe several conditions that happen when the body can no longer cool itself properly and the core body temperature begins to rise. So these illnesses can range from mild to life-threatening. So recognizing the warning signs early for each of them is very important. And this is just general information. We are not intending this to be any first aid class. It's just good information to know. Some of the most common heat-related illnesses include heat rash, heat cramps, rhabdomyolysis, heat syncope, heat exhaustion, and heat stroke. And we will get into these into the next couple of slides. Let's focus on one of the most common heat-related illness seen in hot work environments is a heat rash. And heat rash sometimes is called prickly heat or malaria. And it's not just something that affects babies. Adults can actually develop it too, especially when working in hot, humid conditions. Heat rash happens when sweat becomes trapped in the skin instead of evaporating, and when that occurs, the skin becomes irritated and inflamed. Workers may notice itchy red spots, small bumps, or tiny blisters, and it's most commonly appears on the face, the neck, the back, the chest, or thighs areas where the sweat and friction build up. And some cases can be very itchy and very uncomfortable. But while heat rash is usually not dangerous or life-threatening, it can be very distracting, irritating, and may signal the body is struggling with the heat. It is also one of the most common heat-related issues in warm workplaces. The good news is that heat rash often improves once the skin is cooled down and the worker is removed from the hot environment. Prevention is simple and effective, and we will get into the prevention in the next slide. The best way to prevent heat rash is to keep the skin cool and dry as possible. When sweat is allowed to evaporate, it helps regulate body temperature and reduces irritation. Wearing lightweight, loose fitting clothing, breathable clothing can make a big difference, especially in hot and humid work environments. Staying hydrated also important. Proper hydration helps the body sweat and cool itself more effectively. And workers should drink water regularly throughout the day, not just when they feel thirsty. If heat rash does occur, cooling the skin is the first step. Move to a cooler area if possible, allow the skin to dry, and apply cool compresses for relief. Avoid tight fitting clothing or anything that traps heat against the skin. Most cases improve quickly with these steps. However, if the rash becomes severe, painful, shows signs of infection, or does not improve, a healthcare provider should be consulted for further treatment. Next, we're going to talk about heat cramps. And heat cramps are painful muscle cramps or spasms that can happen during any physical work in hot environment. They are often one of the earliest warning signs that the body is being affected by the heat stress. And these cramps usually occur in muscles that are working hard. They're becoming fatigued, such as calves, thighs, arms, back, shoulders, or abdomen. And doing heavy labor, like construction workers, lawn care, repetitive movement, or prolonged activity in the heat are especially at risk. So, heat cramps are typically sudden, painful, and involuntary muscle spasms, and they may last only a short time, but they can also come and go repeatedly. Even though they may seem minor, they should not be ignored. In some cases, heat cramps can happen along with heat exhaustion, which is more serious condition. So if a worker feels dizzy, weak, nausea, extremely tired, or has rapid heartbeat, additional action should be taken right away. Other symptoms may accompany heat cramps, including sweating, fatigue, nausea, weakness, and feeling generally unwell. The most effective prevention strategy is staying hydrated at all times. Workers should drink plenty of water before, during, and after physical activity, especially when working in hot conditions. Do not wait until feeling thirsty because thirst can be a late sign of dehydration. Replacing electrolytes is also important when sweating heavily. Eating balanced meals or foods that contain electrolytes can support the body, particularly before strenuous activity in the case if they working in the heat. In some cases, electrolyte replacement drinks may be helpful during extended work. A thing that we used to do at our workplace during the summers would we would have the electrolyte popsicles that they could have as a snack for a break to help them cool down. Another key prevention step is limiting strenuous activity during the hottest part of the day whenever possible. If tasks can be scheduled earlier in the morning or later in the day, heat stress risk can often be reduced. Cooling down after work is just as important. If air conditioning is not available at home, which in my house I don't have, using cooling centers or shaded public spaces or swimming in a local lake or pond, as I have, or other cooling environments where the help that can help recover the body. Most importantly, encourage workers to look out for themselves and each other. If someone begins showing signs of cramping, fatigue, or heat stress, early action can prevent a more serious illness. Next, we're going to move on to heat exhaustion. And heat exhaustion is serious heat related illness that occurs when the body overheats due to exposure to high temperatures, strenuous activity, and the loss of too much water and salt through sweating. It is one of the three main heat related illnesses, with heat cramps being the mildest and heat stroke being the most severe. Heat exhaustion can develop quickly and build gradually over time, especially during physically demanding work in hot or humid conditions. This is why early recognition is so important. Common signs such as for heat exhaustion is clammy or cool skin, excessive sweating, dizziness, headache, muscle cramps, extreme thirst, dehydration, weakness, nausea, vomiting, and decreased urine output. Some workers may feel faint or may actually lose consciousness. A rapid heartbeat, fatigue, and difficulty concentrating can also occur. Workers experiencing heat exhaustion may become less alert, slower to react, or unable to continue working safely. If not treated promptly, heat exhaustion can progress into heat stroke, which is a very life-threatening medical emergency. If someone shows signs of heat exhaustion, um, biggest thing we want to do is we want to move them away from the heat. Um, some of the things you can do to prevent heat exhaustion is wear loose clothing, lightweight, breathable clothing whenever possible. Heavy or tight clothing traps in that heat and makes it harder for the body to cool itself. When you're working outdoors, protect yourself from the sun, which could be like wearing sunglasses, wearing wide brim hats, using sunscreen as much as possible. Hydration is a very big thing that you could do and is also one of the biggest and most important prevention tools. Drinking water, drinking electrolyte drinks, and to help maintain a safe body temperature. Workers should also be aware that certain medications or medical conditions can increase risk of heat illness and should consult their physician to see if their medication can cause any problems when it comes to heat-related illness. Another important step is to pace yourself during the hottest parts of the day. Whenever possible, schedule like heavy work for cooler morning and evening hours. And acclimatization is also very critical. That word has always been very hard for me to say, and I don't know why. It's like a tongue twister. But workers who are new to hot environments or returning after time away, they need to gradually adjust. And that body can take days or even weeks to become more efficient at handling the heat. Finally, always stay alert for any warning signs in yourself or others that you're working with. If someone begins to feel dizzy, weak, nausea, or overheated, act quickly. Early action can prevent any serious heat illness. Now, let's now discuss the most serious heat-related illness, which is heat stroke. Heat stroke is a life-threatening medical emergency that occurs when the body overheats and can no longer regulate its internal temperature. Body temperature rises rapidly, and without immediate treatment, heat stroke can cause permanent organ damage or even death. Heat stroke is typically caused by prolonged exposure to heat, high temperatures, intense physical exertion, or a combination of both. And it can happen outdoors during hot and humid weather, especially when performing strenuous work. It can also happen indoors when workers are in overheated spaces with poor ventilation, such as warehouses, kitchens, boiler rooms, or manufacturing areas. So, unlike heat exhaustion, heat stroke is actually an emergency that requires immediate action. Warning signs and symptoms may include confusion, altered mental status, or unusual behavior such as irritability or disorientation. Affected individuals may exhibit slurred speech, poor coordination, or difficult walking. In more severe cases, symptoms can progress to seizures or a loss of consciousness. Physical signs often include hot skin, which may be either dry or moist depending on whether the person is still sweating. While heat stroke is commonly associated with the absence of sweating, it is important to note that sweating may still be present, especially in cases caused by physical exertion. A very high body temperature is a key indicator and should be treated as an emergency. If heat stroke is suspected, call 911 immediately, move the person to a cool area, remove excessive clothing, and begin cooling them right away using cooling water, ice packs, fans, a cold, wet cloth. Don't leave the person alone. The, the heat stroke can happen quickly and become fatal if it is ignored. And recognizing symptoms early and acting fast can save that person's life. We're going to now talk about the employer's role in preventing heat illness through a heat illness prevention plan. And I'll go over that. So a heat illness prevention plan is a written commitment that outlines a company procedures, anything that will help prevent heat-related incidences and protect employees who may be exposed to hot working conditions. It serves as a roadmap for keeping workers safe before heat becomes a problem. And employers are responsible for providing a workplace free of known safety hazards, and that includes heat hazards. So when employees work outdoors, indoors near heat producing equipment, or in any environment where excessive heat may be present, steps should be taken to reduce the risk. A strong heat illness prevention plan identifies where heat hazards exist, who may be exposed, and what controls will be used to protect the workers. And it should also explain how the company will provide water, rest breaks, shade, or cooling areas, training, emergency response procedures, and monitoring for signs of heat illness. Most importantly, the plan should be practical, communicated clearly to all the employees, and consistently followed by supervisors and management. And a written plan is not just paperwork. It is a proactive safety tool that can prevent illnesses, injuries, and even fatalities. So let's build on that and talk about what actually goes into effective heat illness prevention program. A strong, a strong program is essential anywhere employees are at risk or are exposed to hot or humid conditions, whether outdoors, manufacturing settings, or around heat generated equipment. It starts with a risk assessment. Employers should regularly evaluate the workplace to identify where heat hazards exist. Each job tasks are high risk and which employees may actually be most vulnerable. This could include looking at temperature, humidity, workload, and the duration of exposure. And the next are control measures. Control measures are once hazards are identified, steps need to be taken to reduce the risk. This might include providing shaded or cooling resting areas, adjusting work schedules, increasing break frequency, improving ventilation, or using engineering controls to reduce the heat exposure. Ongoing monitoring and evaluation is also important because conditions can change. Workspaces can be fluid, always changing. And when the changes throughout the day, employees should continuously assess how effective their controls are and make adjustments as needed. Additionally, worker training. It is a critical piece of the program. Employees should understand the signs and symptoms of heat illness, the importance of hydration, and what actions to take if they or their coworker begin to feel unwell. Another key component is acclimation, acclimata, acclimatiz- acclimation, acclimatization. Workers are new to heat or returning after time should gradually be introduced to hot conditions over time. And this helps the body build tolerance and reduce that risk of heat illness. Hydration should be encouraged throughout the entire workday. Water should be readily available, and workers should be reminded to drink frequently, not just when they feel thirsty. And then lastly, appropriate clothing will play a good key role when it comes to staying cool and making sure that the heat is being released. So having lightweight clothing, loose fitting, breathable clothing that helps keep the body efficiently cooled. So when all of these components are put together and placed, consistently followed, employers can actually significantly reduce the risk of heat related illness and create a safer work environment for everyone. So now that we've talked about employer responsibilities and what strong heat illness prevention programs should include, let's shift gears a bit. It's one thing to have a plan on paper, but what does that actually look like in practice? This is where inspections come into play. And inspections are how we move from responsibility to reality. And they help ensure that these policies, procedures, and protections we just discussed are not only in place, but are actually being followed and working effectively in the field. And at this point, I'm actually going to hand things over to Carl. He's VOSHA's compliance supervisor, and who will walk you through what to expect during an inspection and how these programs are evaluated in real world situations. Thank you, Carl.
Thank you, Miriam. Good job on explaining all that. So I represent the enforcement arm of the program, and we will be basically doing inspections and compliance assistance in as the temperature changes. So what to expect from us is when an officer shows up on site and it's 80 degrees or higher heat index, they're going to add to their inspection evaluating your heat illness prevention program components, including access to drinking water, rest breaks, and how you have decided to put those into place. Have you put up a tent for shade, or do you have an area where you can cool your workers? Employee training on heat illness. Basically, have you trained them on recognizing symptoms and doing basic first aid for heat? Your acclimatization procedures. So basically ramping up the amount of work that the new or returning workers are doing in the heat slowly over a couple of days, and what your plan is for that based on how hard you're working, and the type of work they're doing. Emergency response planning. How are you going to get that ill worker to either cooled and back to work, or how are you going to get them out of wherever they're at and to the hospital if they need it? And in Vermont, we do a lot of work out in the woods, so you need to have a plan because emergency response may not be able to get to you quickly. Employee interviews. We'll do employee interviews. We'll talk to them about their understanding of heat risks and how well they are trained in that. And then we're going to review their knowledge of symptoms and what to look for and what to do. So mostly it's going to be, hey, have you had any training on first aid for heat, which needs to be done as part of this plan. Enforcement under the general duty clause. So once between 80 degrees in heat index and a heat warning from the National Weather Service or heat advisory, and or a state agency putting out a heat warning or advisory, we're going to be doing compliance assistance. Once those advisories are put out by an agency, either National Weather Service or a state agency, then we're going to switch to the enforcement mode. So at 80 degrees and higher, we're going to be doing compliance assistance help. So getting you, helping you with your program, helping you with, some of the training, getting you resources. Once it gets to an advisory level of heat from the National Weather Service or a state agency, then it's going to kick over into an enforcement mode where we will be going, okay, what is your heat safety plan and how have you implemented it? And if you haven't, then we'll probably issue a general duty clause citation. So next slide, please, Miriam. What are the things we're going to do? And all of my officers now have access to wet globe temperature monitoring. Wet bulb globe temperature monitoring. It's basically an overall heat, how hot it really is based off of temperature, humidity, radiant heat, and air movement. We use that to determine how hot it is for real. And then the officers will also be evaluating the type of clothing that is being worn with additive PPE, and that number adds to that temperature monitor number. They also then will estimate how hard your people are working, which then we put onto a chart from ACGIH, which is proprietary or copyrighted, but you can get it from ACGIH. And the x-axis on that is watts of work, and the y-axis is heat. And there's an action level and a and a and a and over the there's basically two curves on there. One's an action level and one's a, hey, you're in a danger zone. And you plot on that based off the work that's being done. So we'll use that wet globe temperature monitor meter to assess the heat risk. We will then look at your workload and the clothing and PPE that are being worn. That'll evaluate how severe the heat risk is. The results will basically determine us establishing, yes, this was a serious high hazard that falls into the potential for a violation of their general duty clause. Between 80 and that heat advisory, we'll still be running the monitor to show you data, but unless it's extremely hot based off the type of work being done. So say you're working in a blacksmith shop or blowing glass, or it's just direct sunlight in a area with a lot of reflective building heat, then even though advisory hasn't been put out, it might be hot in that area that causes you to need to implement your plan. And if you haven't, we might do enforcement instead of compliance assistance, but it'll be on a case-by-case basis. So we also then, during our compliance assistance part of this, we will help you get a heat plan. We'll help you get, a work rest procedure in place, and get you any help you need from either compliance assistant specialist Miriam or myself. I can answer questions, or we can have Project WorkSafe come in and help you write up a plan as well. And then once we get to that advisory level, you should have already had this in place, and enforcement may be done with an actual general duties clause citation. Are there any questions? Because that is the end of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Carl. There's a lot of good information. Yeah, this is the end of the presentation. I appreciate all those who joined. If you have any questions, you can put them in the chat, I believe, or you can raise your hand and we can open up the floor to you. All right. Well, if we don't have any, this will be saved, and we will have it posted on our heat illness website. And if you would like a copy, don't hesitate to give me an email and we can get that all sent out for you. Thank you so much for joining. I appreciate you.